This is Sylvie Curry from Ramona, California, and I'm listening to the Barbecue Central Show.
Start the game! Let's go!
We'll do it live. Okay. Well, do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
So to get that perfect barbecue, you use wood. Are you sure it's safe? Whatever. We put the lighter fluid on, strike the match, and... Oh! Should we call the fire department? That might be a good idea.
And welcome to the Really Big Barbecue Central Show. This is a show that talks about all things important to the world of barbecue and grilling, originating from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city of Cleveland, Ohio, the barbecue capital of the North Coast. I am your program host, Greg Rempe. Happy to have you aboard here on your Tuesday evenings, a live fire, fun, and frivolity show. If you have wanted to jump in low these many weeks, months, and years with a live fire take, and you don't know how to get in touch with me, here's how you do that.
You can get in touch with the show by sending an email to Greg at bbqcentralshow.com. Or on the Twitter and Instagrams at BBQ Central Show.
Anything else you want to find out about the show can be found at the main website, thebbqcentralshow.com. And here's what's going on in about 13 minutes from now. He has become a almost monthly recurring guest, and more than quarterly, I would say, as we race through 2021 here as it's rapidly coming to a close. Our new friend, the contributing barbecue editor to Southern Living magazine, Robert Moss, rejoins the show. Tonight, folks, I both love and hate to say it, and I do say this, of course, with peace and love.
Peace and love. Peace and love.
If you have long had the argument, conversation, word fisticuffs over if a hot dog is a sandwich or not, again, I am both sad and happy to tell you that Robert Moss is putting that conversation to bed this evening. He is going to give you a yes or no answer. Furthermore, he's going to back it up with results and research and other academic stuff that I typically don't have anything to know about or to deal with. I'm fly by the seat of my pants. Everything is fake news unless it's my news, all that good stuff. Not Robert. This guy is well-versed in putting facts forward, so we will wait for that incredible segment. Tell all your friends and neighbors all about it. We'll touch on some other things as well, not the least of which, last weekend, Robert was a student of Stephen Reichland's Barbecue University down there in South Carolina as well, so we'll get his take on that. Then we'll move 35 past the hour. Not a first-time guest, but a second-time guest, and his last guest appearance was 5 years ago, actually a little over 5 years ago, for what many people think that I am and or lend to the live fire community. My guest at 35 past the hour is the same for the whiskey community, host of Whiskey Cast, which can be found at whiskeycast.com or on your podcast platforms. I am happy to have Mark Gillespie back in the house, returning to the Barbecue Central Show jungle. We're going to be talking about where liquor has gone over the last 5 years, play a little catch-up. There was a brilliant conversation that he had on his most recent episode about the history of alcohol. I wanted to ask him a specific question about that, and perhaps we will get a cocktail recipe from somebody who, as you will see from his background as we were sound checking, has no shortage of drams to pour from. So that's your first hour. Second hour is super busy. Top of the hour, of course, we will be getting into telling you who will be into the finals as we push into month 4 of the Barbecue Central Show American Idol edition. Because at the top of the second hour, we will be eliminating one of those final three that sang our asses off last week. The judges have had their piece to say, but more importantly than that, the votes are in. They closed down at midnight last night. Somebody is going home. That means 2 contestants are going to the finals, which will find a pre-recorded duet, and then where we really cap it and show you that this show has legs going into a season 3 at some point. We will sing live right here on the show in the finals to see who comes out a week later as season 2 champion. Very exciting stuff. After that, 14 past the second hour, we'll be joined by a first-time guest, but somebody who we peripherally have folks in common, which is kind of the case here in the live fire community anyway. He's got a competition team named Swine Life Barbecue. He's got a very budding YouTube channel as well. I'm happy to have Mark Williams joining the show. He'll actually be joining me from the podcast studios of the How to Barbecue Right headquarters, because Mark works with Malcolm, so we'll learn all about Mark and how he got to team up with Malcolm and his competition life and growing a YouTube channel, and we'll get some recipes. I had a listener email me, said, I heard you're having Mark on. He introduced me to such and such. I'm teasing you, I know. But we'll get to that recipe at 14 past the second hour, and then closing out the show. A lot of first-timers here on the show this evening. Jason Baumgartner, now first-time guest to the show, but he has been listening since 2013 or 2014. So we give him thanks and praise for being a longtime Centralite. He is one of the organizers for the upcoming Smoke on the Mountain barbecue contest, and if that sounds familiar, it's because last time Malcolm Reed was on, he had went on to say that he was going to be competing at this contest, but what really put it over the top for him and why he wants to go, and especially trying to win it, is because the winner or the GC of this event gets a real live, real ready-ass to play banjo. And who's doing that anymore? I don't know anybody that's doing that. There is reason for that, particularly where it's at in Virginia. So we'll talk to Jason about the contest and how it has evolved and what has happened here over the last couple of years and how he's got it back into what it is. Hopefully, at the end of July, there is room still. So if you're looking for a competition and you're a competitor, there'll be an SCA event attached to that, plus something else that I'll talk to you about that might make it doubly attractive. I tease it in the newsletter, so lots to look forward to here on the show. Don't forget, you can follow me socially at BBQ Central Show on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Snapchat for a live video feed. You can go to Facebook or Twitch/BBQ Central Show over on YouTube /RD Rempe. Now, I do have an Apple subscription update. On the heels of me taking Apple to task last week for offering what really is an incredibly complicated way to offer ad-free listening to the podcast feed for those folks that are interested. Last Thursday, I was finally able to get approved, and now it is in the Apple Podcast listings. So if you aren't subscribed or use Apple Podcast, it's a little extra info, but a lot of people use it. So if you're not subscribed to me, go into the Apple Podcast, search the BBQ Central Show, and then as you click on the icon, it will bring you, and you'll see a little graphic that says, I think it says subscribe here, or something along these lines, so you'll be able to pay a small monthly fee, and by doing that, you will have all of the ads removed, or all of my live reads removed from the podcast feed. Doesn't help the live listeners, of course, because the live listeners love everything I say, no matter what. Podcasters, a little bit more discerning. So if you want to, it is available to you specifically through Apple Podcast platform. Outside of Apple, if you don't use that or you don't care to use it, there still is an ad-free additional option over at the Patreon page, which is patreon.com/BBQ Central Show. And that will actually interact with most of your favorite podcast platforms anyway. So it's certainly up to you. Cost is the same on either side. Whatever you want to do one, both, neither. Doesn't matter to me. Just an extra offering. Listener feedback from the show here before we get to the first break, and then we get to Robert Moss. Steve writes in, Greg, thanks for the sponsors list page on the website. I just loaded the last of the pellets into my Traeger, and I couldn't remember who made them. Yeah, I put them in another container and tossed the bag. Oops. I went to your site, found the sponsors page, and I've got more cooking pellets on the way. Yes, sir. Great show, great content. But my goodness, stop singing. Thanks again for all you do for the barbecue community. And don't worry, we'll get you into the BBQ Hall of Fame eventually. Steve, thank you for writing in. Thank you for patronizing the sponsors of the show. I ask that you give them first consideration first and foremost before you end up buying whatever you do, but please give them first consideration. The singing will stop shortly at the end of the month, and then you will only have another 9 or 10 months to have show-free singing before we roll up Season 3 of American Idol Barbecue Central Show Edition. Tim in Alabama says, Greg, I have to say I'm not a huge fan of the American Idol portion of the show. While I appreciate the effort, there's a lot of generally bad singing. However, last week, all 3 of you guys were great. There might be a future in karaoke competitions for at least 2 of you. I would say to keep up the good work, but I don't think I really want to encourage this type of behavior going forward. Love the show. Regards, Tim. Tim, thank you very much. Tim in Alabama writing in on the show. What can I tell you? We're trying really hard on the singing. Effort counts like 90% of the time, I think. All right, let me talk to you quickly about Green Mountain Grills before we get over to Robert Moss. Some of the best pellet cookers out there on the market today. 2 different sizes to choose from, or 2 different brands or lines, if you will. Choice line. So that is your bare bones model, the original. Still good size cookers to choose from. A Jim Bowie, a Daniel Boone. Jim Bowie, the biggest one. Daniel Boone's mid-size. So you pick which one is right for you. Both of them will accommodate the pizza oven insert. No Wi-Fi connectivity, no app playing around, nothing like that. Just a really good, solid smoker to start out with, or to keep you satisfied with. Now, if you want to jump up a couple $100, fine. You'll get app connectivity, you'll get Wi-Fi connectivity, you'll get 2 internal meat probes, you'll get some look-in windows, more of a sturdy and robust build on the chassis, some value adds to say the least. But again, this one houses the pizza oven insert as well. Now, if you want something a little bit more portable, might I convince you to take a look at the Davy Crockett? It can go with you anywhere. Still have wood-fired goodness with the pellets. And you're not sacrificing a tremendous amount of capacity as it relates to portability. 2, maybe 3 pork butts if you TP them the proper way. But it's certainly up to you. You can power it through battery. You can power it through the 12-volt converter in your car. Whatever you like, it's ready to go. Sold through dealers only, so find one near you. Go visit the dealer, get educated, and then get home ready to rock and have success. Great success right out of the box. King of the castle, king of the castle.
King in the castle, king in the castle.
That's right, that's you. GreenMountainGrills.com. That's GreenMountainGrills.com. We are back with Robert Moss right after this. Stick around, be right back.
You're listening to the #1 most downloaded barbecue and grilling podcast anywhere. The BBQ Central Show. Broadcasting live from the BBQ Central Show studios in Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to the BBQ Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
Welcome back. This portion of the show brought to you by the Barbecue Guru, creators of automatic temperature control technology, sellers of ceramic cookers with built-in power draft fans and accessories to make your barbecue and grilling life easier. Visit bbqguru.com for more information or call them at 800-288-GURU. The Barbecue Guru continues to be a breakthrough in barbecue technology. My next guest is the contributing editor for Southern Living magazine and rapidly growing friend of the show. We go ahead and race to the hotline and welcome back none other than Robert Moss. Hey, Robert.
Hey, Greg. How's it going?
We are fabulous in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city, ready to get after it here. So we have a main agenda point tonight, Robert, and the more I think about how this even came to be, it was a number of weeks ago. I was on a treadmill getting my morning run in, and I've been taking more and more part in this Clubhouse app, and I'm typically on a panel of speakers in Danielle Bennett's barbecue and grilling goodness. Usually turns on around 7 a.m. in the morning, and it's one of the more, if not the most popular live fire clubhouse on Clubhouse. If that's redundant, I apologize. And this topic came up, and it was maybe a throwaway question from Danielle to transition from one topic to the next. Then she said, hey, I just want to go around and say, is a hot dog a sandwich, which is where we're landing this evening. Now, there were 15 or 20 different people on the panel that morning, and it was quickly turning into a little bit of scuttlebutt. I was actually accused of mansplaining by some of the other female panel members because I had a preface to answering the question, or I thought we needed to qualify something before we could diligently answer that question or potentially correctly answer that question. But I'll leave that off to the side here. When I had tossed it around to Daniel Vaughn, he said, people that argue about this just love to argue. They're arguing for arguing's sake. And you wrote me an email and said, not necessarily the case. I actually have an answer and I can prove it. And here's where we are on the 29th of June, 2021, on the precipice of finally being able to say, here is the answer. And now the stage is yours.
Okay. Well, I don't want to oversell it because I know this is definitely, everyone has an opinion on the topic, right? And so we just gotta have to just work through it, I think, logically, and see if we can get to the answer. So I mean, how do you decide, right? What's the criteria you're going to go to determine if a hot dog's a sandwich? You know, I sort of thought about it a lot, and I think there's about sort of 4 things that you can look at to sort of narrow it down. So there's a dictionary definition, right out of the gate, which is what everybody I think turns to. So
sure.
And then there's legal and regulatory definitions, because actually there's embedded in the code of laws and regulations, there are definitions of whether a hot dog is or is not a sandwich. So we'll start with those 2. So dictionary definition, like if you go to Merriam-Webster or any of the dictionaries, it's pretty clear. Like Merriam-Webster says 2 or more slices of bread or a split roll with filling in between. And so just by the literal dictionary definition, that split roll with the filling, I think hot dog falls, clearly within that parameter. I think where it gets a little more interesting is all the legal definitions. This is usually in the tax code because the states really want to get their retail sales tax. And so in several different states, there are written in the tax law, there's certain, you have to pay sales tax on sandwiches. And so the question becomes, well, what's a sandwich, right? So like New York State actually in their tax code defines a lot of different things, but it has a whole list of what is a sandwich. Included in there are hot dogs and sausages on a roll or a bun and hamburgers on a roll and a bun. They also put burrito in the sandwich category. Though you could argue that maybe it's a tax code. They're trying to get taxes on as many things as they can. The burritos, actually, there's a whole interesting legal history I won't go into where whether a burrito is a sandwich has actually been in a bunch of lawsuits. USDA, Department of Agriculture, actually has a labeling policy that defines what is and what does and does not require being regulated, and sandwiches are listed in there, and it makes clear in their definition, at least, that hot dogs and hamburgers both count as sandwiches. So if you want to just go by the book, by the legal definition, I think that answer is pretty clear.
So how are we supposed to go? I mean, I understand that sometimes you run across topics that are just fun to argue about, or perhaps you're amongst a bunch of people who are just generally good debaters, and they would be arguing over what defines a pile of dog poop and who has the best argument. But at some point, we also want to know what's right, what is correct, regardless of who has the better argument.
Yeah, and that's where let's bring in the other 2 dimensions, right? So the other 2 dimensions I would say are common usage, which is, how do people use the term sandwich and hot dog just in sort of day-to-day life. And then we'll look at historical usage, which for me carries a lot of weight as someone who's interested in food history. Common usage, if you think about it, like if you went to a restaurant and you said, hey, and you picked up the menu and there's a section called sandwiches, and you look down the list and you saw Reuben, Philly cheesesteak, maybe a smash burger and maybe a chili dog and something like that. You say, okay, well, that's the list of sandwiches. If there's a plate of spaghetti in there, you'd say, what's spaghetti doing in the sandwich list? But I don't think anybody would really raise an eyebrow to find a hot dog in between, a Reuben or a muffaletta or something like that. However, if you went to a restaurant and you said, can you give me a list of sandwiches? And they gave you a list and all of them were hot dogs. There's a chili dog, a slaw dog, a mustard dog. You say, well, I asked for sandwiches. These are hot dogs. So I think with common usage, it can vary a little bit. I think certainly hot dog and hamburger are a specialized category of sandwich and people sort of expect different treatment. So that's where I go to the tiebreaker, go back to the number 4, which is the historical usage. And if you go way back to the early days, even before a hot dog was a hot dog, it was a Frankfurter. I think everybody knows that the Frankfurt sausage became the Frankfurter, and that quickly became the around 1889. There's a New York Herald description of Coney Island, and it talks about the Frankfurter sandwich at Coney Island. And from there that follows, there's numerous accounts of Frankfurter sandwiches appearing in various places, Coney Island among them. Within a few years, by 1895, there's an MIT publication that refers to eating hot dog sandwiches. So that's, I think, the first reference to a hot dog in terms of a Frankfurter that I can find. But in the early days, you see lots and lots of menus and newspaper articles and things talking about hot dog sandwiches and also about hamburger sandwiches, because hamburger originally was a Hamburg steak, which is a chopped beef sort of steak that eventually got put on bread. And when it did, it became a hamburger sandwich. Sometimes you'll see it as a hamburger steak sandwich. So early on, at least, people who are eating these things, hot dogs and hamburgers, they said, yep, that's a sandwich for sure. So my definition, at least, that I think nails down for me, hot dog is emphatically a sandwich. And yeah, we can argue about it because it's fun, but there's not a lot of evidence other than just, I don't think that's right, that you can draw on.
Robert Moss joining us here on the show, robertfmoss.com. His website, don't forget you can sign up for his weekly cue sheet as well. A lot of arguments and debates get started, and you can't really track where they started from. Is this another one of those things, or can you actually start pointing back to where arguments started taking place over this?
Well, it's hard to figure out who first argued about it because, they probably happened in bars over various points of time and all that. But there is a really interesting point in time where this argument sort of took off. I actually found, I was trying to dig into this, I found a reference from 1985 where astronauts on the Space Shuttle Discovery, during a quiet moment, radioed back to ground control and asked them to settle a dispute they're having over whether a hot dog was a sandwich. And the ground control actually got all the rocket engineers there on the ground to weigh in, and they actually weighed in. I can't remember. They had some smart ass answer involving measurements and things, but the answer from ground control was that a hot dog was a sandwich, and one of the astronauts lost the bet. So I think up until well into the 21st century, it was just sort of a fun bar bet kind of thing, or some people would argue about when they're bored. But then in 2015, something really curious happens. There's a organization called the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council, the NHDSC. And they are
everybody knows of them, of course.
Everybody knows about them.
Yes.
They're actually an arm of the North American Meat Institute, which is a big industry trade group with a big headquarters in Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C. And for various reasons involving Twitter, there was a little dust up over in 2015 where the NHDC sort of hinted that a hot dog might be a sandwich, and there was all this kind of stuff. So they came out in November of 2015 with a statement. And it was actually, I think there's headline, the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council announces official policy on hot dog as a sandwich controversy, in which they came out and said, something along the lines of, you wouldn't call the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama is a man, but he's not just a man. So a hot dog is a sandwich, but it's not just a sandwich. And then proceeded to sell the hot dog as something, a category apart. Of course, these guys represent the National Hot Dog and Sausage Sellers. So they have a little bias on that. That actually blew up in the press. So there are newspaper stories all over the place, all over the internet. And I think 2015 is when that debate officially became a meme and a raging sort of, pop culture thing. Whereas before it was just something that people would, bored in a bar might argue about.
Robert Moss joining us here on the show, breaking down if a hot dog is a sandwich or not. I believe it is, and I have for as long as I can remember. And Robert has kind of supported my long belief with actual words and history and actual definitions and all the stuff that matters when you're trying to prove an argument.
And none of that will mean anything to someone who maintains that a hot dog is not a sandwich.
Of course.
It's absolutely,
much like I'm going to ask my next segment guest about in some form or fashion. He's the host of Whiskey Cast. I don't know if you're familiar with that podcast or not, but it's like the leading whiskey podcast and news coverage out there. The ongoing debate of bourbon and Tennessee whiskey. I mean, you're instantly looking for a fight there. If you say, hey, Tennessee whiskey fans, you realize that is technically bourbon, right? Oh, no, it's Tennessee whiskey. And blah, blah, blah. So this could be a similar fight on the food fight, if you will, for hot dogs and if it's a sandwich or not. But we feel we've given you the right reference material to make a sound decision here going forward. And if that means you have to change your answer, that's fine. Or just debate as usual, and away we go. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is last weekend you were, I guess, a student or you were enrolled in university once again, looking perhaps for your second PhD, this time in smokeology, as you were a part of Stephen Reichlin's Barbecue University. So I've talked to a few people that have been through there. There's a guy out in Colorado that I know that's been maybe 7 times or 8 times, many years in a row, actually, until the last few years. So have you ever been to a barbecue university via Stephen Reichlin, number one? And then number two, whether you have or you haven't, what was this specific experience like, because it was in a new location?
Yeah. So I've not been to Barbecue U. I've always wanted to. It for like 12 years is in the Broadmoor Resort out in Colorado Springs. So quite a ways from me. And somehow we managed to lure Stephen eastward. And they sort of started last year, but it was sort of an abbreviated school because of COVID. So this year was sort of the first full outing at the Montage Palmetto Bluff Resort, which is a beautiful resort, hotel, and sort of property. It's about 2 hours south of where I am. I'm in Charleston. It's down in Bluffton, South Carolina, so right off the coast in Bluffton. So right on all the May River and all these gorgeous marshes and all that kind of stuff. So I drove down and got to sit in, be a student from Professor Reichlin, and it was quite a great experience. I wrote about it a little bit about the Q Sheet newsletter. And wrote about all the I got to take a bit of time cooking veggies on like one of these big gaucho grills, and we also went out fishing about 5 miles off the coast of South Carolina. Caught a bunch of king mackerel and Spanish mackerel and brought them back, and that was in the afternoon. The classes are in the morning, and then you have some just free time in the afternoon to go do activities like I went fishing. But we brought them to the class next day. Worked with Steve. Even though we were doing them, and we grilled them up and really roasted them over indirect heat, and it came out just absolutely fantastic. And just got to, he must have had 30 different varieties of grills and pits spread around, and it's sort of semi-structured course. You get a little guidance, you get recipes, but then you're sort of off on your own. Everybody's working in groups. So I learned an awful lot, ate a lot of good food, and just had a good time because it's in a great place.
Did you talk to a lot of the attendees there, like from a journalistic standpoint, saying, hey, what do you think of this class, or is it worth the money? Or perhaps maybe even better question is, these are at some palatial resorts, so there's going to be quite an expense attached from whether you were just going outside of Barbecue University or not. So what's your personal take on if you had to drop money to go to the Broadmoor or the Greenbrier prior to that, wherever? Is this worthwhile for somebody like you or me, or is this more set up for rich folks that want to say they have some type of live fire experience after they leave for a weekend?
I think it's sort of in between. I would say it's definitely not just it's just not just a weekend for newbies or anything like that. Everybody out there, I think, was pretty seriously into grilling and cooking. A few people tagged along with friends or family who may be newbies, but most everyone was pretty serious about it. It's definitely expensive. All three of those resorts you named, the Broadmoor, the Greenbrier, and then Palmetto Bluff, these are not really high-end resorts, and so you'll pay the same thing you would pay if you went to stay there just and not go to the university. Plus money on top of that for the activities. So I think it's up to people to decide if what you're trying to do is go master the fundamentals of grilling and barbecue and just really get into the weeds of it. that may not be the thing for you because it's, a half a day and then you go have fun for half a day. So it's sort of a mix of education and recreation. If you're looking for a, sort of luxurious weekend away but instead of just sitting around by the pool or, shooting, going fishing or whatever you would do at a resort, if you'd rather spend your time, hanging out with Stephen Raikkonen and getting to grill a bunch of grills, then it's definitely worth it.
Robert, I want to give you a couple minutes here before we wrap up. November 13th of this year, we'll find the inaugural Holy Smokes, a Low Country Barbecue Festival taking place. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. We just announced to save the date a couple weeks ago. It's going to be November 13th here in Charleston, though it's technically in North Charleston, which is just up the peninsula from downtown Charleston at a beautiful place called The Bend, which is this huge grassy event space that's overlooking the Ashley River and the marshes there. There aren't a whole lot of places in Charleston where you can go hang around outside and just sort of look over the marsh and do all that. And that's where this will be. It's going to be a all-day barbecue festival, the kind of thing where you buy a ticket and it's all you can eat. And we're invited. We haven't announced the full pitmaster list yet. That's going to be coming out in a couple of stages here over the summer. But the sort of founding pitmasters are Aaron Siegel and Taylor Garrigan from Home Team Barbecue here in Charleston, as well as Anthony DiBernardo from Swig and Swine Barbecue, which are two really great barbecue joints here. I can go ahead and say that we're inviting some of our friends, John Lewis from Lewis Barbecue here, Rodney Scott from Rodney Scott. So sort of the Charleston gang will be out there cooking. Don't want to sneak out. They won't let me tell all the rest of them. I really wish I could. The list is almost finalized, but we're definitely having about a half dozen pitmasters come in from Texas. I think we'll have one or two from California, from New York. So it's truly going to be national in scope. And so it'll be a chance not just to eat barbecue, but really get a chance to, eat from some of the best, barbecue cooked by some of the best pitmasters in the entire country. So it's going to be a great afternoon. And if you haven't been to Charleston in November, that's the time to come. Don't have a barbecue festival in July or August. October, November are the ideal times to do it. So it should be a great event for everybody coming down.
And that's going to be November 13th of this year.
Yes,
so head on over to robertfmoss.com. Keep up with that. And I'm sure we'll have him on here a bunch of times before it actually takes place. So as new information comes, feel free to pass it along, obviously. And then as you're back on, we can promote it as well.
Yep. Mark November 13th if it sounds interested to you. And I think the full pitmaster list and the tickets will be going on sale. Pitmaster list come out sometime in August. Tickets on sale before Labor Day. So watch for that. And I'm sure I'll come back on and tell you all the details as we start to finalize those.
Go to robertfmoss.com. Also sign up for that Q sheet that's distributed weekly. And you can see Robert Moss on his website and hear a little bit more than occasionally now, which is great because he's a great guest. Robert, always appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
You got it. There he is, Robert Moss, right there. November 13th, put it on the calendar if that sounded it. I don't know, does getting fed by some of the best pitmasters out there currently sound good to you? Sounds good to me. I think I want to try that. robertfmoss.com. Next time he's on, we'll get fuller. We'll get more complete details. Let's change it all the way around and use proper English. Why not? Mark Gillespie is in the green room. Before we get to him, I will talk to you quickly about Big Papa Smokers, the one-stop online shop for all things barbecue and grilling, a curated selection. Picked by Sterling Big Papa Ball himself, 13 perfectly balanced rubs and seasonings. Popular flavors like Sweet Money, Cattle Prod, Cash Cow, all proven winners on the competition circuit and backyards just like mine. Also, the owner of Granny's Barbecue Sauce. So if you're looking for a new go-to sauce that will please everybody, you got to give Granny's a try. And aside from the rubs and sauces, they're selling cookers. That's right. If you're looking for a versatile smoker that's easy to use, check out that Mac 2-Star General Pellet Cooker. Big Papa's the exclusive Mac dealer, even offering special packages. Not a fan of pellet smokers? All right. Take a look at that Old Hickory Ace BP, the only charcoal smoker that Big Papa trusts on his competition trailer. If you don't know what kind of cooker you need, call them and ask questions. 877-828-0727. That's 877-828-0727. Or shop the website, bigpopasmokers.com. That's BIGPOPPA smokers.com. We are back with Mark Gillespie right after this. Stick around. Be right back.
You're listening to the #1 most downloaded barbecue and grilling podcast anywhere. The BBQ Central Show. Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the BBQ Central Show.
And this portion being brought to you by cookinpellets.com, your number one source for quality wood pellets for all your pellet-driven cookers. Visit cookinpellets.com for more information or to purchase. If you would prefer, Amazon.com has them as well. Centralites, I think we can agree that there have been a few industries that were able to turn the pandemic into a gold rush of sorts. Many portions of the live fire industry saw a record year last year, much of the same this year as we grind through the first half of 2021. Perhaps another industry that I'm guessing saw an uptick in the liquor was the liquor business, especially the brown liquors. But how does one gauge the success or the risings or the goings on in that industry? Easy. You book a segment with the authority in the industry when it comes to covering the goings on in that world. He is the host of the award-winning podcast aptly named Whiskey Cast that delivers new episodes each week. Damn near 900 in total at this point. He's back for a return visit, and I am happy to have him back. We race to the hotline, and welcome back Mark Gillespie. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Greg. How you doing?
I'm fine and wonderful to have. I can't believe it has been 5 years plus since you have been on, and shame on me because so much has happened over that time. However, you look exceedingly
You realize there's been a
well.
lot of good whiskeys have matured in that time.
Yes, well, that's what it takes for whiskey, right? It takes time in order to mature.
It takes time.
Over 5
Just
years,
like
I
barbecue,
have
can't
not
rush it.
matured at all in 5 years. I'm happy to say that.
Same here.
Yeah. I mean, you look exceedingly well. What's the secret? Is it the dram after dram?
It's the nightly dram keeps the doctor away.
Yes, good. Now, outside of not traveling as much, Mark, as you look back, what have been the biggest change or changes or adjustments that you have had to make over the past 14 months or so?
I'm doing a lot more Zoom stuff now. I think we all are. But it actually has sort of been a blessing for me because it forced a bunch of the folks in the whiskey industry to upgrade their IT connections at the distillery so that they could do Zoom calls internally within their companies because, for instance, Scotland didn't have the greatest, a lot of the distilleries in Scotland didn't have the greatest network lines coming in. So you couldn't use Zoom to talk to distillery managers. We had to use phones. And now they're all used to doing Zoom, so it's easier to get these guys on a Zoom call. So it's increased the audio quality. But the fact is that we're now getting more and more tastings with these guys. It's easy for them to jump on a Zoom call with a bunch of us when they've got something to talk about, rather than try to do a press trip or try to send out a news release. They can send out samples to us individually if they can get them shipped, and then we can do the tastings online with them. But I'm looking forward to getting back out on the road in the next month or so.
Mark Gillespie joining me here on the show. WhiskeyCast.com is the website, and you can follow him on Twitter at WhiskeyCast. Mark, 5 years, a lot of time to catch up on what I'm sure have been some really big news breaks here over the last 5 years since you've been on the show last. But let's take a look back at a year ago as March and COVID set in. What were the biggest stories to come out of that time?
Well, let's talk about the biggest story that didn't happen.
All right.
We all were going nuts when COVID hit and governments started shutting everything down. The bars were shut down, tasting rooms at distilleries were shut down, and for the majority of the little small craft distillers that are out there, the mom and pop distilleries in your local neighborhoods, most of the revenue they collected was for bottle sales in their distillery shops and the cocktail sales in their tasting rooms. They don't do a whole lot of what we call off-premise or liquor store sales or on-premise in the bars and restaurants because they don't have the kind of production that gets them on the shelf at your local bars and restaurants, or especially the chains. So there were real concerns that if we didn't get some help from Congress for the distilling industry, that a bunch of these guys were going to go out of business. And while we did lose a few, a lot of them were able to pivot to hand sanitizer just to keep the doors open.
Mm-hmm.
But the Paycheck Protection Program systems and the other loans that came in and the other government assistance, we did not lose nearly as many distilleries as I think everybody thought we would by the end of last year. And that is good news.
It's funny that you mentioned the hand sanitizer. That was like a huge thing as it was happening. There's a couple of very small distilleries on the west side of Cleveland. And you're right. They pivoted from doing their whiskeys and bourbons or whatever they were into to doing 2-gallon jugs of hand sanitizer. And you were scheduling a time to pick up. And they seemed that they were doing fairly brisk sales outside of what they were normally getting. I don't know, but there were people coming in. There was cash hitting the till. So, like you said, that's probably one of the things that a lot of folks maybe saw or experienced but didn't really talk about. And that's a good story. From a consumer side, Mark, was there an instant spike in sales as things started to really set in? Was there needs or lack of supplies and all of this stuff like some of the other folks were experiencing in other industries?
Well, there were problems with supply because you had some states like Pennsylvania that shut their state liquor stores down completely. And the small distillers benefited from that because they were allowed to stay open. So you had places like Wiggle Distillery in Pittsburgh that they couldn't open their tasting room, but they were able to sell and ship within the state. So they started doing some good business out of that. Overall, we saw about a 2% increase from what I've seen on the stats in overall alcohol sales during 2020, a 2% increase over 2019. And while that number sounds small, that still amounts to a lot of booze that went out the door. But we are paying for it now because you have distilleries that, and I've gotten reports of shortages in some regions. I had a listener in Memphis email us about a week and a half ago because he could not find the 1.75 handle bottles of Old Forester bourbon and was being told that we can't get it anymore. And we checked with Brown Forman, which owns Old Forester, and they said, yeah, we're having problems getting glass bottles. And we're going to have shortages in some areas, but it's not going to be long term. And we're not discontinuing it, but we will need some time to get caught back up. So yeah, you are having shortages of corks and stoppers and labels, especially when that stuff has to be imported because of the problems with logistics globally and getting stuff moved across the oceans.
Let's talk about that 2% increase here just for a second. In the live fire world, the success was coming from folks being at home, having access to the internet, finding a new way to cook if they weren't already into live fire at that point, and then buying the inventory that was available to them through various outlets and so forth. I'm asking you to speculate, of course. Unless there are reports for you to specifically reference, was the whiskey portion on the 2% up more because people were dulling the pain that the pandemic was bringing in, or they were bored and just consuming more, or some of both? What do you think?
A little bit of both. And remember, all the restaurants were closed too, so people had disposable income. They weren't going out to eat. So they had money to spend on, and they weren't traveling. So they had disposable income that they could do mail order because a lot of states started allowing shipments and direct to consumer shipments. That market opened up. So you started having people who had extra money to spend and figured, okay, if I'm going to be stuck at home, I'm not going to drink cheap stuff. If I'm going to be stuck at home, let's get the good bottle.
In your most recent episode, you have an in-depth conversation with a college professor out of British Columbia about the history of alcohol. Folks can go grab it on your website or on your podcast feed, of course. One of the things that really struck me, and I guess this is more of an observation than a question, was how telling where the market seemed to change. And what I mean by that is there was fermentation, and then here comes this thing called distillation. And that really changed the game and perhaps opened up a much bigger door to things like alcoholism and drinking one's self to death and a few other bad things. As he said, you have to really try to consume enough beer or wine to do the same type of thing that you would be able to do with liquor. And even then, it
Right.
might even be at a 3, 4, or 5%. It would be really tough to do. Could you make the argument that without distillation, we could be perhaps a more soberly drunk society had distillation never came about?
I wouldn't have a job.
Well, we don't want that. We're just talking off the cuff.
Yeah, no, I think he makes a very good point for that. But we would have people have been figuring out ways to alter their brain chemistry or knock that prefrontal cortex out of line pretty much since the cavemen figured out how fruit ferments and what happens. And I think it was the comedian Dennis Miller who once said, if we didn't have drugs or alcohol or anything, people would go stand in their yard, spin around until they got dizzy just to get the same feeling.
Right.
So if we hadn't had distillation when we got it, somebody would have figured it out. They're going to go, okay, what can we do with this to make it stronger?
Mark
and
Gillespie joining
about no matter what.
Yep, no doubt. Mark Gillespie joining us here on the show. WhiskeyCast.com is his website, and at WhiskeyCast on Twitter. In some bourbon news or whiskey news in general, one of the bigger moves recently was the release of George Dickel's bourbon, and they have long been known for their Tennessee whiskey, which, as I had referenced in my opening segment with Robert Moss, if you're a true whiskey nerd, you understand how mash bills run, how storage works and age works, and all the other stuff that qualifies bourbon as bourbon. So you would know the Tennessee whiskey is technically a bourbon, which is where the fighting ensues. Outside of that, can you break down a bit further why this particular effort by this particular distiller is kind of a big deal?
Well, because George Dickel basically was the number 2 Tennessee whiskey behind Jack Daniels for the last 30, 40 years, and had never done anything other than Tennessee whiskey, with the exception of Dickel Rye. What happened was that Nicole Austin, their head distiller and general manager at Diageo's Cascade Hollow Distillery in Tullahoma, where Dickel is made, was going through her warehouses and finding barrels that didn't match the taste profile that they need for their regular Dickel expressions. And these were good whiskeys and good barrels. They just tasted more like bourbon. So she said, okay, we're just going to go ahead and create Dickel bourbon. She convinced the marketing folks to let her do it, put an 8-year-old age statement on it just to plant a flag in the ground. And yes, Tennessee whiskey is bourbon. In fact, it's written into Tennessee state law. They basically copied in the standards for bourbon at the federal level into the state law for Tennessee whiskey, that you have to make it the same way you make bourbon. The only thing you have to do differently is use the Lincoln County process of charcoal filtering. And frankly, the federal government doesn't have a problem with anybody else using that for bourbon. So that's why, yes, Tennessee whiskey is bourbon.
I mean,
And
why the
I gotta
Tennessee?
admit, I like the Dickel bourbon.
So why the big dick contest then? I mean, if it's bourbon, then why not? Why do they have to call it Tennessee whiskey? Is it just because why does anybody do anything because you can?
Yeah, because they can. Because they're trying to differentiate themselves. If you've got 5 Tennessee whiskeys and 50 bourbons on the market, you want to differentiate yourselves. That's why Lem Motlow got the federal government back in the 1950s to let him use the term Tennessee whiskey on Jack Daniels, because he wanted to differentiate himself from bourbon in marketing. It's all a marketing thing. And yeah, it's basically a bit of a measuring contest, but frankly, they're both equal in my opinion.
If we were going into the distillation business then this coming week, Mark, would we want to put on a Tennessee whiskey on the shelf then, just to set apart because there's fewer of that? Or is there not necessarily fewer of one or the other?
Well, there are a lot fewer Tennessee whiskeys because you can make bourbon in any U.S. state, but you can only make Tennessee whiskey in Tennessee. So pretty soon you're going to run out of real estate and water.
Right. So we better snatch up our land quickly if we're going to make this $1 million.
There are more distilleries popping up in Tennessee. In fact, Jeff Arnett, who was the master distiller at Jack Daniels, left Jack last fall, and we just a few weeks ago found out what he's doing. He's going into work with a new company called Company Distilling that will have a place just outside of Knoxville in Alcoa, Tennessee. as part of a big master planned development. And they're also going to have a couple of other satellite distilleries out in the Pigeon Forge, Dollywood area and Gatlinburg area, just to attract the tourist crowds there. So they are actually getting serious about expanding that. The folks at Old Smoky Moonshine in Gatlinburg just released their James Ownby Reserve Bourbon, which is named for Joe Baker's, I think, 5th generation great-grandfather, and Joe's the guy that founded Old Smoky, so he gets to name it. But that's a Tennessee bourbon. That's not a Tennessee whiskey.
Before I ask you rating on that, because, I mean, in my opinion, you rated it pretty high, which means you must have liked it at 93 points. But before we get to that, you had mentioned that the head distiller at Dickel was going through and tasting some of these other barrels. I mean, I would assume, I don't know, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume in many of the other bigger distilleries that this is a typically general process where they're going through and tasting stuff. Do other companies get rid of it, or do they let it mature further to get to whatever taste profile that they were looking for in the first place? I mean, it seems a little earth-shattering that she was maybe the first one to say, hey, this really tastes like a bourbon, so instead of Tennessee whiskey, we're going to label it a bourbon. But is that something that generally happens? Did you hear any of that, Mark?
No, I didn't. It froze up, and I just refreshed my screen, and it popped right back up. So.
All right. So I was saying, let me try and cut it down a little bit. The distiller at Dickel was going through and tasting some of those barrels and said, hey, this has more of a bourbon profile. Is that something that typically happens in all the other places? And if so, what are they doing with the stuff that tastes like bourbon? Do they let it age out more in hopes that it gets to where they want it to be?
No, they just blend it away in smaller amounts, and then the stuff that tastes like Tennessee whiskey, they'll just put more of that into the blend. Because keep in mind that whiskey is more about blending. You're taking 200 barrels and putting them together to create a batch, something like that. I'm throwing out the number 200.
Sure.
Well, in this case, you might have to use a few more of the...
Oh, dear. It's better when he freezes and I'm talking than when I freeze. Wait, I'm not froze, but he is. He'll come back here in a second and finish up talking about blending 200 or 300 barrels at a time. I didn't realize that that's exactly how the process works, is that they're blending multiple barrels. I thought that they just poured a barrel out, or maybe 5 or 6 of them that were all pumped into the barrels during a bottling, and that they're just racked and aged, and there you go. So I didn't realize that there was, but I mean, I guess when you stop to think about it, these are really big companies and providing a credible amount of alcohol, and so you're going to be blending a couple hundred different barrels. Anyway, Mark, I was just saying that you were kind of surprising me that there were that number of barrels going into making a batch, as it were. I just didn't know anything about that.
Well, a lot of folks like to talk about small batch whiskeys.
Yeah.
There is no definition for what a small batch is.
Mm.
A small batch could be 5 barrels. A small batch could be 500 barrels if they're using, say, like a Jim Beam is doing, say, 2,000 barrels for a batch of Jim Beam or Knob Creek. A small batch to those guys might be a couple of hundred barrels. So there is no definition. It's what you call it. Small batch is a marketing term, realistically. It's small batch is whatever you want it to be and whatever you can get away with. In fact, the folks at Russell's Reserve actually labeled the ultimate contradiction in small batch whiskeys, because they had labeled one of the Russell's Reserve expressions a few years ago a small batch single barrel bourbon. And that's about as small a batch as you can get, is
No
one
doubt.
barrel.
That's the smallest.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you?
Can I give you a little bit of a news tip for your barbecue friends?
Please.
Kentucky Bourbon Festival is expanding next year in 2022. Mark the weekend of June 11th and 12th on your calendar, because the Bourbon Festival's organizers are working with the Kansas City Barbecue Society.
All right.
They're going to do the Bourbon Classic Barbecue competition in Bardstown, Kentucky. And it'll have the pro category, but they're also going to have one for the distillery teams, because a lot of the distilleries have their own pit guys too.
Sure.
So it's going to be a barbecue weekend next June 11th and 12th in Bardstown.
All right, we'll put that on the items that are coming up here. Are you into smoking cocktails before we wrap it up this evening?
I have goofed off with a little bit. The folks at Carolina Joe's sent me a cocktail smoker, and the butane torch was taken away from me so I don't burn down the house around all the whiskey in the back here. So I haven't played with it much, but I have tried it once or twice, and I got to admit, I'm not a cocktail person. I prefer my whiskey neat. I don't even like putting ice in it, but every once in a while a cocktail is nice, and smoking it does, adding with like the wood pellets or whatever, does give you a little bit of that Isla essence in some whiskeys that otherwise wouldn't be smoky. So there's nothing wrong with it.
All right.
Once in a while.
Understood. Mark Gillespie is the host of Whiskey Cast, of course, and you can find him over at whiskeycast.com, at WhiskeyCast on the Twitter, where he's very active. Mark, appreciate the time, and let's make sure that we're doing it before another 5-year elapses again.
Anytime, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
All right, you got it. There he is, Mark Gillespie from Whiskey Cast. That's right. And a number of you jumping in on the instant chat saying, I listen to Whiskey Cast. Tell Mark we said hi. Greetings from Pittsburgh. Pennsylvania has whiskey friends. Say hello to Mark. All right. Nice to see the intermixing of smoking and drinking still doing well. 2021. We thank Mark Gillespie for joining me. And where am I at here? All right, let's do this. I'll talk to you quickly about Pits and Spits since 1983. Handcrafting smokers and grills in Houston, Texas in that time. Establishing itself as one of the premier brands in high-quality offset and pellet cookers. Setting itself apart by using heavy 7 and 10 gauge steel in every cooker. 304 stainless roll-top lids and front shelves as well. Why does it matter? By using heavy quality material, Pits and Spit smokers reach and maintain temperatures so you don't have to worry about the meat. You can worry about the meat. You don't have to worry about the heat. That's right. Now, where some companies focus on being a low-cost provider, Pits and Spits focuses on craftsmanship and using quality materials. Are there cheaper ways to do this? Of course. But they don't like tack welds, cheap stainless, electronics that you can't trust, all that stuff. Plus, steel suppliers giving you material that can be used in the harshest environments around, so they will perform in any and all conditions. And the controllers made right here in the States. Unimpeded transparency into the programming. If you don't have a dealer near you, call Coy in the shop at 844-650-6250. Whether you're a backyard grill master looking to cook steaks for the family or a competition team smoking 50 racks of ribs, they got something for you. Visit them online, pitsandspits.com, all spelled out, or see their Pits in the Wild across social media at their handle at Pits and Spits. Once again, all spelled out. We're back to wrap the first hour. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Continuing to produce incredibly mediocre content in an exceptionally professional way. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
This portion being brought to you by Fireboard 2, Fireboard 2 Drive, Fireboard 2 Pro. Monitor up to 6 different temperatures simultaneously. Connect to Wi-Fi for cloud-based monitoring or connect via Bluetooth. And if you have Alexa or the Google Assistant in your home, you're in luck because Fireboard fully integrated with both. Find out more by visiting fireboard.com or call 816-945-2232. That's Fireboard 2, Fireboard 2 Drive, and Fireboard 2 Pro. And we thank Mark Gillespie. Once again, his website is WhiskeyCast, C-A-S-T, whiskeycast.com. You can subscribe to his podcast on all the podcast platforms. The preeminent news and journalistic authority in the world of whiskey, and he has the awards to prove it. We might have got started around the same time. He's got almost 900 episodes under his belt. I got to have roughly the same, maybe more. But great. Guy the Cooking Sam. Weighing in on a little pullback from the cat stuff that I used to talk about. I peed on that interview. Uh-oh. It's an inside joke. All right, we're pointing to the second hour. Plenty to get to, including the American Idol Barbecue Central Show results at the top. Go ahead and refresh your libations and join me in just a few moments. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central Show right here on the Barbecue Central Networks. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's Sam the Cooking Guy, and you're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Some call him a fool, some even call him a douchebag. But I say Greg Rempe is the greatest thing to happen to barbecue since caveman.
Happy to have you aboard here for the really big barbecue show.
Boing. We cook because we have to, and we grill because we want to. Hit me!
Fine, how's it going?
You have a great show. I'm a big fan.
Boing.
So what seems to be the problem here? This man looks like he's dead and he's in the crackle.
Charbono! It's all about the charbono, dude!
Succulent fish. What?
He ate sushi or wieners.
Oh, listen, Lavernius, shut your face.
I'm shaking like a dog shit peach seeds.
We have top men working on it right now. Top men.
And just like that, we are into the second hour. Welcome aboard to the Barbecue Central Show. We talk about barbecue and grilling things right here. Your Tuesday evening's live fire fun and frivolity show. Still to come on this hour of the program. Mark Williams from Swine Life Barbecue, first-time guest. And additional first-time guest, Jason Baumgartner from Smoke on the Mountain barbecue event. It'll take place at the end of July, so stay tuned for that. Don't forget, you can follow me socially at BBQ Central Show on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Snapchat /BBQ Central Show on Facebook and Twitch for a video feed /RD Rempe on YouTube for a video feed as well. Also, you can now get an ad-free podcast feed experience if you so desire by becoming a patron over at the new Barbecue Central Show Patreon page, which is Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/BBQ Central Show. If you are an Apple Podcast user, you can get the ad-free show by subscribing directly within the podcast app itself as of last Thursday. So there you go. Don't forget, coming up this Friday on the best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less is episode 183, taking you back to July 2nd, 2013. And who else but show favorite Ted Reeder? The Master Planker was a guest on the show back then. And before I was joined by Ted, I actually talked about learning a new way of doing a rib prep, which was putting water on the ribs before the rub, not yellow mustard or Worcestershire sauce or any type of neutral oil. It was water. I also asked Teddy for his take on this method. We also talked about the impending 4th of July holiday that was getting ready to unfold back in 2013. Getting your grill clean and safe, some menu items. No better person on earth to talk live fire than Ted Reeder. So make sure that you tune in Friday to hear his answers and what they sounded like from 8 years ago. And if you want to hear a guest or a segment again on the show that you particularly like, send John an email, jon@thebbqcentralshow.com, and he will do his best to meet your expectation. Well, oh well. You know what that sound means? YouTube's probably hating me for using copywritten music, but forget about that. I've forgotten about it already. Perhaps you have. They don't pay me, so kiss off, YouTube. Last week, the fourth month of the American Idol Barbecue Central Show edition took place, and there was a lot of singing. Then there was a lot of critiquing by the in-studio judges, also Doug Scheiding and Rusty Monson, who have been summarily removed from the event, sat in as judges as well. Yes, Dan, I am still peddling the watch. It's right here. Don't worry. Love the watch. If you're just tuning in, or you banished from memory what our singing sounded like for you, I have put together a very brief interlude to refresh your memories. It sounded something like this.
I'm gonna fight them all. A 7-nation army couldn't hold me back. they're gonna rip it off.
Well, I fly that plane called the Angel Flight. Come on, brother, you're with me tonight.
Shake it up, you're to blame. Got me swaying, little honey. My heart's a ball of a burning flame.
There you go. There's your refresher course in month 3. The semifinals, as it were. And then you voted all through the week. Voting closed up at midnight last night. And there were a total of 278 votes. By the way, that's 278 unique votes. That might sound like not a lot, but I'm not a nationally televised show, so get off my ass. Secondly, that's the most votes that we have currently received within the show in those 2 seasons. Moving on to the semifinals, and I can say this specifically, the winner of this month's semifinals and moving into the finals, John from Michigan. Look at that. By the way, John pulled away with winning. He received all first place votes outside of 7 unique votes. And out of the remaining 6, I got 5. So, he did very well. Which leaves me and Jeff for the final spot. And after the votes were tallied, I am here to tell you that the person not moving on is this guy right here. It's Jeff Rice. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, man. How you doing?
Well, Jeff, I am reluctant to tell you that you will not.
Andrew, you are not the father.
You will not be moving on. However, we've really put it to the test. And during our sound check a little earlier, I said, hey, this is really the episode that I think might make or break the seasons going forward. We can get onto that here in a second. But as the votes are revealed and the judgment is levied, your thoughts on season 2 and where you ended up shaking out in this competition?
Well, I guess now I can finally say I know what it feels like when you don't win them all. I finally have actually lost. And on the other hand, I will say that everybody brought their A game this year. There was a dramatic increase in quality and production and thought. I'm still going to, I'm a little shocked, obviously. So I'm going to say that I want a little bit of retally, but I'm sure that the ballots have all been cleared and all that.
What are you saying, that
but
there was shenanigans and tomfoolery afoot? Wow.
Well, I can't believe that the nation didn't come and back up me. But all right. Well, I'll accept it. I'll accept it.
Do you want some smoke with those sour grapes, Jeff? Come on. What are we talking about?
No, 100%. Rusty kind of nailed it last week when I had a hiccup in my delivery, and it basically, the song that I was trying to do ended up kind of being a debacle, so I had to punt and try to bring something else that at least I knew what was going to be. So if I could have got my first song off, I would not be sitting in this moment right now. I will be that confident and tell you that I would not be sitting here. But hey.
Here's what I like to hear, that, one of the judges here in studio said she might have gotten the thought that you were pretty confident with your abilities and you were mailing it in thinking that you were going to get voted into the finals where you might unleash the beast. But, kind of horn-dogged it into the finals, and that might catch up and bite you in the butt. But that's not the case. You were being creative. You were thinking outside the box. You were doing things that people haven't done before, and for whatever reason, the production didn't come together. Now, from a host standpoint, I like that because I was wondering if anybody was really going to put forth effort into this, or was I really just strong-arming people into this? And I guess what I'm finding out is that people are competitive, and you want to do good, you want to sound good, and you're going to do what you can to separate and try and win, which means we should be bringing back season 3 of American Idol Barbecue Central Show Edition.
Of course. I mean, I'm not in the championship now, so that stings, from being last year's champion and now, handed a defeat. I have to be humble about it. I have to understand that, things happen, but I only have myself to blame, and I'm in it to win it. I don't like failing, but to each its own. That's how it ended up. I will accept in a very 50% of a way that I lost. Okay.
Oh, all right. 50% is better than 2%.
Right.
If the offer is extended, you would come back for a season 3 then?
Of course. The nation would be so disappointed if I wasn't back.
Right.
I mean, and I think the Central Show enjoys me too. I mean,
yes.
I just let them down. And that happens, and you learn lessons, and you should probably pay attention to the calendar a little better too, and say, oh, it's not the last Tuesday of the month, it's the 4th Tuesday of the month.
Right, the 4th Tuesday of the month. Oh, I see.
So,
all right. Well, we learn.
No excuses.
We live and learn.
Excuses.
Never excuses. Yeah. We live and learn, as you say. So obviously the invitation is there. You've taken it. So we'll see Jeff Rice coming back for season 3, and you will see him at the end of the month as a special guest judge, as John and I will go head-to-head in the finale, which we'll see a pre-recorded duet, and then we will sing live for your votes to see who will be crowned finals champion. Jeff, appreciate the effort and the time this season, and we will see you not only at the end of the month, but, of course, for season 3 next year.
Perfect. Well, and congratulations to you and John. You guys really did step it up and bring all the barrels, man. There was not a unloaded gun coming to town last Tuesday. So congratulations. I'm proud of you guys. And, hey, now you kicked off the champ, so now it's up to you two to duke it out. So
here we go.
Good luck, fellas.
We'll see how it goes.
Great
Jeff,
job.
always appreciate the time, my friend. Thanks so much.
You bet. See you later, Greg.
There he is. Jeff Rice right there. And now it is John. And now it is myself. And we will be battling for the finals. 4th Tuesday of the month. What? 4th Tuesday, Jeff? 4th Tuesday. Not last Tuesday, as he said. Yes, end of July. We're coming up to July. 4th Tuesday of July, we'll find the finals of the American Idol Barbecue Central Show edition. Yes. Boy, do I have a live show or a live song that is going to blow your pants off in a positive way. Let me talk to you quickly about Primo Cookers as we look for Mark Williams from Swine Life. What do we know about Primo Cookers? Ceramic, yes. The finest ceramics to be used in these cookers, yes. Patented oval design offering true two-zone cooking, yes. Cripes. Did I not send him a link? Hold on. Williams. This is egg on my face. Stand by as I send Mark a link. Shame on me. There it goes. All right, he's got the link. We'll see him here in just a moment. So you have a patented oval design offering true two-zone cooking. You have more than 60 cooking configurations, if you care. You have a made-in-the-USA product, precision-controlled manufacturing, and, as I had mentioned before, the highest quality ceramics that you can get. Product updates for this year. New Easy Lift Hinge reduces force to lift the grill head by 70%. What does that mean? 35-pound lift originally, now an 8-pound lift, which means even I can do it. Precision control top and bottom air. So now you have numbers to slide to 1, slide to 4. Not 1 finger width apart. That's not very strategic and specific. Now you can go to a number. You can see all these existing upgrades at a Primo dealer near you, and they can go on your current cooker if you don't have one already. PrimoGrill.com is the website. You can also find dealer locators there. Primo Ceramic Grill on Instagram and Primo Ceramic Grills on Facebook. All right, Mark Williams is in the green room, and we will get to him here in just 1 second. You are listening and watching the Barbecue Central show right here on the Barbecue Central Network. Stick around. Be right back.
Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central show.
And this portion brought to you by Pit Barrel Cooker, the most unbelievable outdoor cooking device on the planet. Currently available in 2 sizes with a host of accessories. Whether you're a beginner or professional, definitely a cooker you want to add to the arsenal. Visit pitbarrelcooker.com and tell them the Barbecue Central show sent you. Don't forget about the new cutting boards that they just came out with. That's the end-grained product, endgrainusa.com, which you can also buy over at pitbarrelcooker.com. My first guest in the second hour, a champion pit master, and he has been building a solid following over on the YouTubes as well. Swine Life BBQ is the place to go to check him out. We welcome first-timer to the show, Mark Williams. Hey, Mark.
How's it going, man?
I am doing absolutely fabulous, Mark. Appreciate you making time for the show. And I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with you both from the YouTube side of things and your association, of course, with Malcolm over at How to Barbecue Right. But for those who aren't, can you give us a little backstory on you, where you grew up, and if live fire has always been a part of your life?
Yes, sir. I'm from Hernando, Mississippi. Been cooking and competing, I guess, since like 2013. And was lucky enough to meet Malcolm back then, and relationship just grew from there, and blessed to be where we're at now.
Did you go to college or anything like that?
Yes, sir. I actually went to tech school, was a diesel mechanic for 16 years, so never would have thought I'd be doing barbecue the way I'm doing now, and it's definitely a dream come true.
Were you over the road, or heavy-duty truck mechanic?
I was all Caterpillar equipment. We done a bunch of dozer stuff like that. Worked in the shop, built engines for 13 years, I guess, and was a supervisor before I quit and started chasing the dream.
So you got into barbecue competitions in 2013. How were you introduced to that? Is it something you heard an ad for on the radio, or you just hung around dudes that were into that kind of thing?
About like everybody else. Back then, I mean, we catered a ton, and my dad, he was getting ready to retire, so we had a rotisserie, a big old hickory, and we had all the equipment, and that's when pit masters were kicking off, and I was like, man, if they can do it, I can too. And quickly got humbled, got our butts kicked, and how I met Malcolm was, I was like, I'm pretty competitive, so I'm not going to take a whooping that often, so we took one of his classes and become friends, and started actually doing pretty good and having a good time doing it.
Mark, here are the similarities and the differences between me and you. Similarities, both ultra competitive, taking ass whippings. I quit. You're like, no, let's learn how to become better and dole out the ass kickings. That's where you're different than me. I'm like, if I can't win right away, I just quit. So that's it. That's why I've stayed with the podcasting so long, is because I'm currently winning. But as soon as somebody starts kicking my ass, guess what? I'm going to quit too. That's going to be it. I'm very easy to quit. So in regards to the competition, Mark, are you a believer of one particular sanctioning body? Will you go across all of them? What do you think?
I mean, really, Mississippi, in our neck of the woods, most everything is KCBS or MBN, so I have no problem cooking either one. We've done a ton of SCAs, not as much as we, here lately, but back in 2017, 2018, I mean, we were probably doing 30 or 40 a year. And just cooking and having a good time doing it. So I have no problem. I'd love to go cook some of these other contests around the country just to see the different flavors and kind of see how we stack up against guys that kick butt every time out west and down south in Florida and stuff like that.
Mark, can you maybe explain or dispel a myth, which is MBN competitions are grossly more expensive than KCBS? And if it is, by the way, make sure that you're setting the record straight here. I think sometimes people get MBN and Memphis in May. I mean, similar in concept maybe from a judging aspect, but perhaps not from an event standpoint. Memphis in May, huge, the build-outs, all that stuff, and the corporations. MBN, the sanctioning body, which could be found at any mom and pop city across the country if they do the sanctioning paperwork properly. Is it more expensive or not?
I don't think so, because I mean, really, you can go to MBN and you could cook just ribs. It's probably overkill, but we're doing Galax here next month, and I'm gonna cook probably 10 slabs just for the rib category. And that's probably overkill, but you could easily sign up just for the rib category. You're not buying a $250, $300 brisket. You're not buying 3 and 4 pork butts. I mean, you're buying strictly just ribs. Now, yes, if you want to go, cook ribs, shoulder, and hog, you're gonna have a chunk of change wrapped up in it, but you don't necessarily have to do that.
Since you've been doing KCBS, what's your opinion on things that they're doing well and things that you would offer up as suggestions to change if they asked?
So my last KCBS, we have been, with me working with Malcolm in the Malcolm shop and the storefront, we've been slammed this year. So I have not cooked a KCBS this year. So I don't know that my point would be valid enough, but just from hearsay, I mean, we had a blast doing it. Of course, there's always room for improvement. That's any contest. I mean, there's so many variables that are really out of everybody's hands that you can't point blame on nobody. If you got a table of death, I mean, that's just part of the nature. I mean, that's going to happen. I know. I guess now, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're doing a poker chip drawing now for judges to sit at table, and I've heard a lot of negative feedback about that. But I don't know if that's because that it's really inconsistent or if it's. I have no idea. We're going to find out in Galax for sure, but that's the only thing I've heard different since the last time I competed in a KCBS contest.
Mark, I've been doing this show for a long time now, and I've slowly trended more and more away from the competition side of things. Not all the way, but in a pretty significant way, because there always seems to be the same few complaints that never seem to get put to bed, judging, the board, the expense. And I'm not here to offer solutions because I don't take part in it, but I hear it. Do you think if these things were somehow non-issues or really addressed and put to bed, that there would be a resurgence in popularity and that the competition barbecue that you knew when you were getting into it in 2013 would somehow come back?
I wish to goodness I could go back and cook 2013. We've granted several contests, and looking back, we cook now way better than we did back then. And it's competitive. I mean, right now, I don't think it's necessarily so much as anything KCBS is doing. It's everybody's competitive now. Everybody's took a school, or they've watched a class on YouTube, or they've done something. So everybody's 10 years ahead, whereas, 10 years ago, we didn't have that. You basically got out there and you got your teeth kicked in until you figured out what you done. And then when you've done it right, you were already at an advantage. So now, I mean, everybody's been to a class, and it's competitive. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
If you look back at the profiles you were using 8 years ago, has that really changed at all or not so much?
8 years ago, I never would have put sauce on a brisket.
Really?
If you don't sauce a brisket now, I mean, what are you doing?
Is that the most ridiculous thing, like things that you were doing back then that you wouldn't do now?
For the most part, I mean, right now, I think back then, if you didn't turn a pork box in that weighed 5 pounds, we were filling them up. And now you see a lot of these pork boxes that it's just a couple of money muscles and literally a few strands of pork, and they're 180. Definitely the quantity of meat that's going in the box, I don't think is as critical. Back then, in our mindset, we were thinking, fill it up, make them look like you're confident in that box. Now it's, strictly, if it's not perfect, don't put it in the box. And if we'd have done that 10 years ago, who knows where it would have been.
Mark Williams joining me here on the show from Swine Life Barbecue. SwineLifeBBQ.com is his website. And over on YouTube, he's got 29.2 thousand subscribers. So If you're not subscribed currently, go on over and sub up there and check out what he's got going on. Mark, I'm going to make a statement, and I'm looking for your take on it. If you have a team, for instance, Swine Life Barbecue, if you are in a situation where there is both a KCBS event and an SCA event, but they're not at the same event itself, they're not at the same contest. They're separate, maybe 2 hours away from each other. Is there a tendency in 2021 now where a team would pick the SCA event over the barbecue event?
I could see it if it is a single SCA, yes, just because you're going to save a little bit of money. If double, and you're looking at 2 entry fees, it's still, yes, it's going to be cheaper, but I'm going to have to lean toward the KCBS just because, you're spending time with your friends. It's a more drawn out deal. You're cooking 4 categories. It's more involved, which I miss that aspect of it. I mean, we enjoy our SCAs, but I enjoy, managing a fire, sitting there putting sticks on the Outlaw for 6-7 hours and getting everything, really trying to nail all 4 categories. I'm going to lean toward the KCBS, but I could definitely see the SCA being, it's very appealing to people, especially getting started out, just because you can get in there for a lot cheaper and a lot easier, and you're not having to buy briskets and buy ribs, and it's a one-day deal. So that's definitely a perk for a lot of people.
Mark, what's the current cooker lineup that you have, and out of them, do you have a particular favorite?
Right now on the back porch, we have a Grill of Grills pellet grill. We have just got a new slow and sear kettle, which I'm excited about. Got a couple of PKs, couple of PK 360s, Gateway. Of course, we got the Outlaw patio. I've really become passionate about using a stick burner just because that's still an art, it's still a craft, and you're still managing a fire, and it does take a little bit more patience. And of course, we got a couple of comp pits, and I'm sure you've seen some of them on Malcolm's, the BFO and Fancy, and we just enjoy cooking. I'm not picky at all. I love them all.
Can you really beat the flavor that a stick burner puts on food? I've long had the, not argument, but conversation with folks that if I have the time and I'm not going to be running around with the kids somewhere over the course of the weekend, I'll fire up the Lang and burn sticks all day, because it's really almost uncomparable to the Traeger that I have, or the GMG, or the Pit Barrel, or the other number of cookers that I don't have a fleet like you have, but almost. And I find that pound for pound, they all come up short on flavor because of whatever that Lang or whatever that real fire is doing. Do you have a similar thought on that?
I agree. There's something about just burning, fresh wood is, you're not, it's something different about it. The biggest thing I notice, the flavor's there, but on the stick burners, to me, the texture's so much better. It sounds crazy, but I always refer to it as it's a gentle cook. The convection, the airflow, the way those pits are burning the moisture out of the sticks, and you're running different size splits. That to me is the biggest selling point on stick burners. You really can dial that texture in a lot better than I can on any other pit. And that may be just me, but to me, it's all in the texture.
When people ask you, because I'm sure you get this question a lot, especially with the rapid growth of the YouTube channel, what cooker should I buy? How do you answer that? How do you take somebody through a buying process?
It's hard not to sell them on a pellet grill, especially if somebody's just getting starting out. You don't want to, say, hey, go get you a $4,000 stick burner. They get tired of fighting with it, or, trying to learn it, and they'll never cook again. So my thing is, get you a pellet grill and, learn the recipes and, kind of see how everything goes and how meats cook and how the protein cooks, and learn that aspect of it. And then step up to a Weber kettle, learn a little bit of fire management, a Weber WSM, a Gateway, a simple drum. Learn the fire management after you learn the recipes. And then that way, if it's either you're doing it wrong or if the recipe is just not right. Don't jump in head first and get a pit that you're going to have to, manage a fire, and you've never done that before, because you're going to hate it. It's not going to be fun. So definitely get something that you can enjoy at first and then grow from there.
Mark Williams joining us here on the show, giving us some advice on how you buy a cooker. Not to be contrarian here, Mark, but I tell people, buy that offset and suck it up and learn how to build the fire and learn how to take it up from 0 to 250 or 300 or where you want to run it at, or better yet, learn where the sweet spot is on that cooker, because especially offsets, they seem to settle into the temperature that what they want to run best and most efficient at, giving you that clean burn of smoke so you know how to run it from there. And then, and maybe it's just because of when I came up, like Malcolm and I kind of got into this whole barbecue thing around the same time frame. So, when I was getting into it, Weber Smoky Mountain was the first one, and then I got a close pit and, learned that whole monster. But I always felt like I had a really good understanding. Let me rephrase that. I always felt like I could go to anybody's house at that point after learning the Weber and then the close, that I could go to anybody's house, regardless of what pit they had, and be able to cook on it immediately because I had the background and the experience of fire management, which you're not getting when you use a pellet cooker. So
no, you're not. You're right about that.
But pellet cookers are certainly the way to go these days. I mean, they're very popular. Do you think, out of all these cookers we've just mentioned, that ceramic cookers might be getting left in the wind at this point? Their marketing isn't up to snuff. I mean, certainly the product is good, but I don't really hear a lot of people talking too much about it.
I think so. I mean, I love a ceramic cooker. It has its place. Am I going to smoke a 10 or 12 hour butt on it? No. But if I want to go out there and cook some flat iron steaks, I mean, it's right up its alley. We help judge a local contest here every year, and the guy that kind of runs the contest, that owns the property we do it at, he is a ceramic cooker dealer. And so a bunch of his buddies, they all cook on them. And I mean, you can almost pick them out. Like when they turn the ribs in, like I can almost tell you which one come off that ceramic cooker. And it's crazy, but I'm with you. I mean, I think ceramic cookers are kind of, you don't hear as much out of them. Not that they're a bad pit at all. I mean, I still have one on my back porch and I love cooking on it. But if I'm going to go pick one out of the arsenal, it's not going to be my first pick by no means.
Mark Williams joining us here on the show from Swine Life Barbecue. All right, so I have some questions from folks writing in or things that I had seen on your YouTube channel as well over the next couple minutes. A fan writes in, Greg, ask Mark about this bacon-wrapped donut hole. He kept me in the running for Grandfather of the Year. They were total greatness. Regards, Don Wadlow. So we celebrate Don for writing in. Thank you, Don. What about these bacon-wrapped donut holes, Mark?
They are the best sweet and savory bite that I've ever had. This was a deal. I'm sure somebody's done it before. I'm not saying I'm the first by no means, but me and my wife were sitting there talking, and we set up a demo day up here at Malcolm's shop. It was my Saturday to do a demo, and I was like, we're going to do a bacon-wrapped Saturday. And I love a good donut hole. So we threw bacon around it, put it on the pellet grill, let it go, and then drizzled it with some caramel. Had a little barbecue rub on top of it, and it is excellent. I mean, that donut hole is like a sponge when it comes to that bacon rendering, and you get the perfect texture of a donut, and then that bacon's almost crispy on the outside. It is a perfect one bite.
Are you using one of those old-fashioned type donut holes, or is it a regular glazed donut hole? What do you use?
It's a regular glazed donut hole. I did try it with the cake donut, and it was good, but it wasn't as good. A good fresh yeast donut that's been, fried that morning, it's hard to beat.
The other thing I want to ask you about before time expires is the recipe and video for simple and delicious ribs. So if you could take us through that process. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about or confirm is, are you a sprayer of juice of any kind, or are you just a water sprayer?
I'm just a water guy. When it comes to spritzing ribs, it's just water. If we really want to do some old school barbecue, I might throw a little apple cider vinegar in there just for that tang, but 99% of the time, I'm water. I don't want to add anything to that rib or to that pork or brisket that may clash with something that I did and not realize it. So you don't have to worry about water. You're just keeping that bark moist and keep on cooking.
If you use apple juice and you start spritzing too early in the cook, could you end up with a set of much darker ribs than you might anticipate?
Definitely. Anything with sugar, I've seen that 1,000 times. They spritz with sugar, and I've seen guys make up Italian dressing mix, and I'm guilty of it. But anything sugar coating on that rib that you don't want it to get dark, that sugar's going to get dark over time. So that's definitely something to watch out for.
Mark, what's the next video that we can look forward to?
I think I done a TikTok recipe last night. It turned out really well, so we're probably going to roll that into a YouTube recipe. It's going to be basically bologna kebabs, but it's going to have whole pickled jalapenos, onions, pickles, all the things I like, glazed with vinegar sauce, and it's a heck of a bite.
Sounds absolutely delicious. You can find Mark Williams over at swinelifebbq.com and over at his YouTube channel as well. Great first appearance, Mark. Really appreciate the time, and we will look for you again soon, my friend.
Yes, sir. I do appreciate it. I'm honored to be here.
You got it. There he is, Mark Williams, right there. Swine Life, pulling out a huge first appearance, giving us takes on competition barbecue, on how to buy a cooker, on bacon-wrapped donut holes with caramel, whatever, and barbecue rub on top of that. Bacon-wrapped everything. Bacon's still the number one barbecue condiment ever, I think. Wow. Jason Baumgartner is ready to go. Before we get to him, I will talk to you quickly about Yoder Smokers. Yoder Smokers, designing and building all of the products right there in the United States and building pride through craftsmanship and world-class customer service. That's the backbone of how they built the company. This approach translates into what can be a truly bespoke style product that elevates gatherings with friends and family. They're honored to have trusted places in the backyards of America, from pellet grills to wood-fired offset pits or charcoal grills. Consistent blue ribbon flavor has become synonymous with Yoder Smokers' name. Make no mistake, Yoder Smokers' flavor-driven design is unique to each style of pit, and their team has developed their cookers to perform time and time again while outlasting the competition for generations to come. It's this generational thought that's rooted in the handmade products and defines the integrity of the core values: American-made quality, endless flavor, the benchmarks of Yoder Smokers. So go grab one today. Visit yodersmokers.com and check out what they have. That's yodersmokers.com. As we come back, somebody's got a chance to win Black Smoke from Adrian Miller. That's right. So get your hot little fingers ready, because you get a chance to win not only, let me show you. Yes. Oh, I started to read that, if you can believe it. This one is already autographed by Adrian Miller. And if you want, and you're the winner, I'll autograph it on my side as well. Why not? Decrease that value quickly like the Hindenburg. Stick around for Jason Baumgartner to talk about Smoke on the Mountain. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the #1 most downloaded barbecue and grilling podcast anywhere. The BBQ Central Show.
Now's the time on the show where we give stuff away, yeah. It's free and you don't have to pay a thing, that's why it's free, yeah.
All right, your chance to win an Adrian Miller autographed version of Black Smoke. As I mentioned, I will sign it for you as well if you're so inclined. Send me an email, and in the subject line, Black Smoke Rules. Black Smoke Rules in the subject line, and you can win your very own free copy of Black Smoke. If you send me an email, and the first one in the subject line, Black Smoke Rules. Good luck.
Celebrating over 10 years of prolific and unparalleled live fire barbecue and grilling talk. And yes, it's still being done from Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to the BBQ Central Show.
And this portion being brought to you by Smithfield. Through the grilling season, get recipes and tips from pitmasters like Chris Lilly, Darren Worth, Ernest Cervantes, and Charles Cridland. Head on over to SmokingWithSmithfield.com and purport and report your first place ribs and shoulder finishes over at SmokingWithSmithfield.com. Otherwise, recipes at Smithfield.com. During the beginning of last month, you heard Malcolm Reed go out of his way to mention a barbecue event in Galax, Virginia, specifically because of the cool trophies you can win should you do well over the weekend. And one of the organizers of the contest happens to be a longtime listener to this show and he hit me up after he heard the mention from Malcolm. I asked if he wouldn't mind coming on to talk about the event, perhaps show off one of those trophies. So we race over to the hotline and welcome in longtime Centralite, first-timer to the show, Jason Baumgartner. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Greg. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm saying Baumgartner correctly, yes?
You are, yes.
All right. Very good. Good for me.
It is good, yeah. So I'm bummed because I wanted to win that book, but I was too paranoid to click away from the link you sent me. So
guess what? The good news is I have another one to give away. So next week, make sure those hot fingers are ready so you can take place in the email competition. And I'm sure we'll get a winner here in just a second. So before we get into the event here, Jason, can you give me a little background about yourself personally, professionally, and, of course, how you ended up getting into the whole barbecue scene?
Certainly. So professionally, I am an occupational therapist with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I've been with them for going on 9 years now, serving veterans in our neck of the woods here. Personally, I got involved with live fire because of when I was in my internship for occupational therapy. I had one of our clients, we were just discussing barbecue. I was in North Carolina at the time. And she mentioned that they had done some competitions and handed me a copy of the bull sheet. That was sort of my first intro into it. Grew up in a home that didn't really get into live fire much, didn't do a whole lot of cooking. Just was basically used to some burnt hot dogs and burgers on the grill on the 4th of July. And so then I did what you shouldn't do. I went out and got a $60 Brinkman cooker from Lowe's and ruined several pieces of meat and stopped cooking for about 5 years and said, I'm done. I'm no good at this. I'm worthless. And decided to give it a try again when I became a certified judge in 2013. Went and got a Weber Smoky Mountain, found the virtual bullet, and had some successful cooking there. And it's been a love affair with barbecue ever since. So started as an NBN judge, transitioned over to KCBS as well, and KCBS master judge. Been doing that pretty heavy ever since.
Competitor at all, or just judging?
I have never competed. It's something I've thought about doing. I've got a cousin that competes a little bit, and wanted to dip my toes in the water. And be honest, I don't have the confidence to do it.
So you're a KCBS judge. Is KCBS getting an unfair amount of flack year after year about judging sucks, table of death? Nobody talks about angel tables, continuing education, blah blah blah. I mean, you're on the other side of what I would normally talk to. So what do you think?
I am on the other side of it. As far as the chip thing, I actually haven't been to a contest yet where Mark was talking about them drawing chips. I haven't been there yet. I feel like, being on the judge's side, I feel like everything is as fair as it possibly can be, especially how they do the system at the contest, at least that I've been to, where they try to mix in the judges' scores that may necessarily score higher, some that score lower, and then you've got some in the middle. So it kind of tries to eliminate that table of death, that angel table. I feel like that works out pretty well. So in a way, I feel like they get an unfair shake. But again, I'm not a competitor, so I'm sure I'd be singing the other song if I was on the other side.
Sure. Jason Baumgartner joining us here on the show. Smoke on the Mountain VA, like Victor Alpha. SmokeOnTheMountainVA.com is the website if you want to check this event out while we're talking. So let's talk about Smoke on the Mountain here for a moment, Jason. Give us a little history of the event itself.
Okay. So pretty much Smoke on the Mountain as a competition started in 2004. It was started by a local restaurant owner, and they had competed on the circuit a little bit and said, hey, Galax needs to have a contest. So they brought the idea to Galax and got the approval to shut down the streets. It's right there on Main Street in Galax. We shut down the side streets, and they brought it to life, and it was the NBN only contest for several years. And then in, I believe it was 2016, they made it a dual contest. It went dual contest 16, 17, and 18. And then in 19, there was a little snafu with reserving our date to be a dual contest, and so we sort of lost our date with KCBS. Another contest snagged it that was within 150 mile radius, and so we went back to NBN only. The patrons in the city were sort of wanting KCBS back, and so we changed the date, moved it a week, and got KCBS back. And then we're also bringing in this year SCA. So not only do we have NBN, KCBS Pro and Backyard, we also have SCA with a wing contest on Friday night. So I believe, to the best of my knowledge, Smoke on the Mountain in Galax, Virginia, and Praise the Lord are the only two contests that have all three, NBN, KCBS, and SCA.
So if you're a competitor, that's certainly giving you a veritable cornucopia of things to choose from. And I would assume you can enter one or the other. It doesn't have to be both in order for you to take part, correct?
No, we have quite a few that are entering both. We have lots of dual competitors. They want to take advantage of that, NBN, KCBS. And then also we have quite a few that are doing the SCA on Friday night. We also have some judges that are, so they're going to compete in SCA on Friday night cooking steak, and then on Saturday they're going to turn around and judge. So that's pretty interesting to have some judges on Friday night turn around and or some cooks on Friday night turn around and be judges on Saturday.
The competition is certainly set, and if you're any type of competitor, no shortage to keep your attention. What other things are going on inside of this barbecue event outside of the competitions themselves?
So like I was saying, the whole main street of Galax and subsequent side streets are shut down. So we've got a ton of vendors this year. I think we're up to about 30 vendors. So that's anywhere from food vendors to craft vendors to, we have a lady that's written a book, and she's going to come and sign some books there. And we've got a various array of vendors and things going on. And then we have at the very end of the main street, we have a stage that's blocked off. Friday night, we're having a very good 80s cover band, and then on Saturday night, we're having a local band that plays a little bit of everything, and then Will Jones Band, who is currently down in Nashville, up and coming country artist, playing on Saturday. So you just flashed the logo for our T-shirt this year. So that's going with the 80s theme of the Friday night band. We sort of did a Back to the Future spin on the T-shirt logo this year, and I think it's pretty cool.
I also see that Galax.
That's the 2019 shirt. So
yeah, I got it. I see that Galax is also the world capital of bluegrass and old time music. Yep. What the hell is old time music?
So it's a form of bluegrass music. If you're familiar with bluegrass, the sounds of the mandolin and the banjo that I have here behind me. The story is that it started back in the 1920s in the back of a store in downtown Galax. There was a fella in New York that was having a little bit of success with that kind of sound, and a family from Galax, the Aldermans, loaded up and went to New York and made a record, and everything sort of evolved from there. And the Galax Fiddlers Convention was formed. It's in its 85th year as being the largest bluegrass old-time music convention. People come from all over the world. When I say they come from Australia, they come from every stretch of the world to compete in Galax, Virginia, and that's the second week in August. So it's a big couple months in Galax. So that's sort of, you talk about the unique trophies that we have at Smoke on the Mountain. That's the impetus of that, is that we are the capital of that type of music. So you see behind me there's a picture there, so you can see that's Feltz Park in Galax, Virginia.
That's no joke, man. I mean, that's a lot of people.
You're talking about a city of 7,000 that grows over that weekend to that picture that you see there. It's pretty amazing. And I grew up having that around and didn't really understand what it was all about until, I go off to college and tell people where I'm from, and they know exactly where I'm at. They're like, "Oh, you have that big bluegrass festival there." And I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly where I'm from." So I unfortunately do not play any of the instruments that
You're not going to grab that banjo over your right-hand shoulder and pick us a tune?
I did take a semester of banjo in college, and I had lots of people encourage me to give it up, to not pursue that any further. So,
yeah, I get that. So can you grab that and hold it a little closer to the camera? by
yeah, I
chance?
sure can.
Yeah, I mean,
I
that
sure
is,
can.
that is something else. I know if Malcolm Reed is going out of his way to say what a cool trophy an event has, then that's it. I mean, look at that. The whole, I don't know what you technically call that, but the face of the guitar has got the logo there, 2021 Grand Champion. That is the actual Grand Champion prize right there in your hands right now.
It sure is, yeah. So that's the MBN Grand Champion, and then for KCBS, we actually do a full-size guitar. That's the KCBS Grand Champion, and then for the KCBS Reserve Grand, we do a mandolin. And then for first through third in each of the categories across MBN and KCBS, they get the violin or the fiddles that we have behind us there. So.
Jason Baumgartner joining us here on the show talking about Smoke on the Mountain, which will be, what are the dates again?
It's July 23rd and 24th in Galax, Virginia. And those of you that don't really know where Galax is, so this is another one of our plaque handouts, but it's exactly right here where the Galax leaf is. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. There it is. So that's where Galax, Virginia is. It's right on the North Carolina border. So fans of the Andy Griffith Show may know the name of Mayberry. That's modeled after Mount Airy, which is just south of Galax. So.
All right. Well, that's a little good geography lesson there, because most of my fans probably have no idea on geography. And now we know where Galax is. You mentioned that you have an SCA event as well. How important do you think SCA is to maybe an MBN or a KCBS contest? In other words, do you think that if there wasn't an SCA event attached to your particular event, you wouldn't have the same amount of interest? Or do you think it just is a value add to have it? Regardless if there was one or not, there would still be the same amount of people that coming weekend.
I mean, I definitely think it's a value add, and I think it has drawn more competitors, and I think it'll draw more spectators down on Friday, because it's quite a display to have all the stakes, laid out on the table. And that was really what we were trying to do, is get a little more action downtown on Friday night, and SCA fits that bill perfectly, especially with the up and coming nature. People are getting pretty excited about SCA. So.
What's the current enrollment for the contest right now?
As far as SCA or total, or
total, yeah.
Okay, so we got like 41 teams total for the barbecue side, and then 28 for the steak side. So we're doing pretty well.
Is there a cutoff at this point?
We are not cutting people off. We're letting it go. We're letting it go until the city of Galax has said, if you need more room, we can find you more room. We can shut down more streets, and so we're letting it go. We really wanted to come back with a bang in 2021, since we didn't get to have 2020, and I think we're going to accomplish that.
Jason, where can people go outside, or is the best place to go the website, smokeonthemountainva.com, for information or register or so forth?
It sure is. That's got that has everything on it. It's got Google Form sign up. If you're not a fan of the Google Form sign up, it's got a PDF version. It's got links straight over to the SCA site, because we like to funnel everything through their site, because they sort of wrangle everything in on the SCA site. They take care of the judges and everything. So that is the best site. Vendors can sign up there. So that either that or call the Twin County Chamber office, which this event is ran through the Twin County Chamber of Commerce. So that's the people who I represent, and we put this on. I'm on the board of directors for them. So
we know Killer Hogs is going to be there. We know that Swine Life is going to be there. Are there any more big name teams that you feel like dropping to encourage folks to get out there and try their best against, or is that kind of a taboo thing to do?
I don't mind it. We're happy to have Jack's Old South coming back. It's been several years since he's been back in Galax. I can't remember the exact year that it didn't, and I think maybe our date change may have worked well for him, because he was doing a cooking class at his place in Unadilla, I believe it's how it's pronounced.
Yep.
That same weekend, and so he's like, I can't come, I've got a conflict. And then this year we see his name back, so I hope maybe that might have been, you know, the date changes, it got him back. And then Jonesy Q, Jeff Jones, he's coming. He's been coming to the contest for several years in a row. We've got one team, King's Cooking out of Charlotte. They've been to every single contest, I believe, and we're in our 16th year. They've been there every year. So we've actually named a corner, it's King's Corner, because they're in the same spot every year. So yeah, you know, we've had some big names there in the past. The Shed competed there for years. They filmed their TV show. I don't know if you remember when they had that TV show. They filmed that there one year. I was actually on it for a few seconds, and my country accent was so thick they had to subtitle me. So that was fun.
Really?
I don't know that it was the country accent, but they did subtitle me. So that was my joke.
I don't know. You seem to be a pretty eloquent speaker right here on this show. So no subtitles needed. I can understand everything. Look, I don't want to turn the table. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there was some drama on that particular show, and I don't know if anybody thinks drama's fabricated. That particular drama was not fabricated. Their entry was dropped by a high school student that was carrying it up the stairs. Now it was for anything but, and they ended up still winning the category. But that drama was not fabricated. It was 100% real.
What are they letting a high schooler run anything for? High schoolers don't care about anything.
I wasn't involved at that point, so I don't know.
Wow. Unbelievable. Well, all right, so I don't want to turn the tables on you too harshly here from promoting the event, but you've been a listener to the show for 8 years or so. What's your favorite part of the show?
Oh, by far my favorite part of the show is you and Sam the Cooking Guy.
Really?
I look forward to his segment. I look forward to that segment every time it comes on. You know, I love everything about it. I love the banter back and forth. I even love that I hate when you guys talk over each other. I don't know. It's something about that segment cracks me up every time.
It's usually me trying to get on top of my own show. It's like he's taking over and he just won't listen to me. So now I have to play bully tactics, lower his microphone and increase my microphone like the old days and Zoo Radio 107. But, you know, what are you going to do? All right, well, I appreciate that. Look, if you're a competitor and you want to try your hand at MBN and you're already a KCBS cook or the other way around and you're also a steak cook, then Smoke on the Mountain in Galax, Virginia has everything a competitor wants. MBN, KCBS, and an SCA, and there's going to be a lot of vendors and a whole bunch of other stuff going on while that barbecue competition is going on, and it's July 23rd and 24th. So get over to the website, Smoke on the Mountain in Galax, Virginia. And if you come out on top on the MBN, you're going to win that brilliant banjo that's right over Jason's shoulder right there. And that's the exact one that you're going to win. This isn't a replica. It's going to go from his house right into the safe, and then it will stay there until whoever wins it. And we'll see what it looks like as it's prominently displayed in somebody's house or wherever you put barbecue paraphernalia when you win it. Jason, really appreciate you coming on tonight talking about the event. But more importantly, in 8 years as a Centralite, man, I'm totally pumped up about that. I love the fact that you've stayed with me this long. And, you know, for me personally, I appreciate that so much. And it's great to have you on.
Yeah, I'm on every week. And, you know, you haven't missed an episode in a really long time. But when you would miss an episode, it was always like an off week for me. I didn't know what to do when I was driving. I was lost. So I appreciate you for doing this and putting in the effort every week.
No doubt. I appreciate that. Thanks so much for coming on, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You got it. There he is, Jason Baumgartner. You can go over to Smoke on the Mountain in Galax, Virginia. Smoke on the Mountain VA.com is the website. And sign up. You can do KCBS. You can do MBN. You can do both, which sounds like if you're going to go, why not do both? And then do the SCA on Friday. All the most popular things going on right there. And how about that banjo? I think it's boss. All right, let's work to close it up. Stick around, and we'll be right back to do just that.
Whole packers, full racks, legs and thighs, injecting butts. If you've never heard this before, you might think you found the best XXX show ever. Let's get back to the most homoerotic host out there today, Greg Rempe.
All right, welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by Vortic Watch Company, a small batch custom watch manufacturing and vintage restoration company located in northern Colorado. They take antique American pocket watches, turn them into wristwatches. Their mission: preserve and enhance the legacy of manufacturing excellence in America. In order to do that, they combine traditional cutting-edge technology, create unique quality functional timepieces with exceptional value. And here's the coolest part. Each watch that Vortic makes is a unique, one-of-a-kind piece. Vortic, founded on the motto that America wasn't assembled, it was built. Check out more by visiting VorticWatches.com. Well, this is very interesting because my pal scripts that should be firing off here. Okay, well, that happened.
Hello, this is Joe with Smoking Joe's Pit.
All right, now everybody just relax here. So I don't know where those went, so I can't stop them. So now I got to stop everything myself. Stand by for this so we can do it the right way. All right, shut that down, and now we're ready to go. All the way back in the first hour. Who did we have? Do you remember who we had in the first hour? That's right, Robert Moss, who has laid down the answers, the corresponding reference and documentation that a hot dog is a sandwich, and if you don't like it, go pound salt. We don't want to hear about it anymore. Then, who did we have on after Robert Moss? Mark Gillespie, WhiskeyCast host. WhiskeyCast.com. Subscribe to his podcast, award-winning podcast, WhiskeyCast, on all your podcast platforms. You get all the news and insights from the whiskey world. I plan to have Mark back much more frequently than every 5 years, which is what he was on last time. Second hour, Mark Williams was a first-time guest. SwineLifeBBQ.com. And, of course, we close it out with first-time guest and longtime Centralite Jason Baumgartner from Smoking on the Mountain, SmokeOnTheMountain, VA.com. That's SmokeOnTheMountainVA.com. By the way, we do have a winner of the book. Wally Inskeep wins. Wally, send me your shipping info in a separate email. Just write book winner. I'll make sure it gets sent out to you at some point this week, but don't quote me on that. Big show playing for you next week as we get into July, of course. Malcolm Reed will be back. Sam the Cooking Guy will be back, amongst a host of others. Perhaps we'll get a visit from Mitch Benjamin from Meet Mitch to talk about his new book. It's going to be great. September 11th, 2001. I will never forget. Until next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, this is your program host and proud U.S. American Greg Rempe. Good night now.
Hello, this is Joe with Smoking Joe's Pit Barbecue, and you are listening to the Barbecue Central Show.